3, 2.
Hello, I'm Jim Eskin. On behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my privilege to welcome you to our 18th Nonprofit Empowerment Webinar Series. You know, we're going to talk about the word pivot. And for the first time in our series, we had a pivot. This originally was promoted to be a show on peer-to-peer fundraising. And we are going to address that, looks like on Wednesday, September 2nd. But our authority, Steve Bondadillo of Wellesley, Massachusetts, ran into a family emergency. And our prayers and thoughts are with Steve and his family. And I'm glad to have someone who's a pretty good pinch hitter, my friend and colleague, Marv LeRoy. And we're going to discuss what really has been the most popular topic, the discovery, cultivation, and solicitation on stewardship during COVID. And I'd like to introduce our producer, John Largent, who's CEO of Game Day Media, just to take a moment and to talk about the logistics and particularly how people can share comments and questions.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate everyone attending today. Just want to give you a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions for Marv or Jim, please place them in the Q&A chat, either at the bottom of your screen if you're on your laptop, or the top of the screen if you're on your iPad or your mobile phone. And just also want to remind you, the weather is a little iffy, and so you may experience some lag with your internet connection, but we're aware of that, and we'll do everything we can to mitigate the problems with that. And back to you, Jim.
Hey, Marv, thank you. I'm looking at the cover slide, and I see cultivation twice. Now, we believe in cultivation, but not that much. That second one's supposed to be stewardship, and that's my fault.
I think that's probably proportionally correct.
I want to take a moment here. Yeah, I want to take a moment here to pay tribute to a great American hero, the late Congressman John Lewis from the state of Georgia. And to me, he exemplified courage, compassion, and service, all the qualities that we need right now. And he was a true hero. And he answered this question: can one person make a difference? And John Lewis certainly made a difference in his life. And Marv, I think our nonprofit partners, be they professionals on the staff, a CEO, a director of development, be they board members, they can make a huge difference. And just like John Lewis, for the 80 remarkable years of his career, was a hero, it is now a time for new heroes, and we welcome. And Marv and I believe that we can take anybody who's in a nonprofit and who brings a knowing head and an honest heart, and we can turn them into an effective fundraiser. There is 1.5 million nonprofits in the country. There's 100,000 just in the state of Texas. There's 6,000 just in San Antonio. And they are so essential because, as Marv and I know, when nonprofits do well, we all do well. Because each of you, I don't care if you're a professional or a volunteer, a donor, you're touching and improving, saving lives at a very, very important time. And this is a difficult time because we're in an environment in which what we don't know is a lot more than what we do know. And it's a time for each of you in your nonprofits. You don't know that much, but you do know how the crisis is impacting your nonprofit. You know how you can help, and it's time for board and staff and management to get together and to provide the leadership they can. Marv, you know we have a little tradition here. We'd like everybody to type into the screen, nonprofit strong. Marv, by the way, what are we?
Always nonprofit strong. Nonprofit strong. There it is.
And we, more than ever, in June of 2018, Andrew and I were proud to launch Eskin Fundraising Training. It was after a very fulfilling career in higher education and advancement. I enjoyed working with community and business leaders who I discovered were fearless in everything they had to do in their lives, with one exception, Marv, asking for a gift. And so, and Eskin fundraising training, we have declared war on fear of asking for the gifts, and we think it's really a matter of demystifying the art and science of fundraising. We do a monthly newsletter, Stratagems. We want you in our database. By the way, at the end of this show, we're going to send you the slide deck and a recording of this. If you're not in our database, you just click on the PDF slide and you can add yourself. Last year, we were very proud to publish our first book, 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons. It's only 80 pages. And we like to think, Marv and I bring a lot of knowledge to the table, but in our workshops and in cyberspace, there's a lot of knowledge in the audience. And we like to embrace the concept of the learning community. And by the way, today we're going to talk about fundraising virtual, but really you get down to it, whether you're in person or virtual, you have 4 distinct phases. You have to identify your prospects. You have to forge a personal and emotional link between the prospect and your mission. And then you set the stage for the most effective ask, the who, what, when, where, for how much. And finally, you close the loop by thanking the donor, because we want to go back to Marv the following year and ask him to give again. And by the way, you know, we keep on saying people are afraid of asking, but the truth is, when you've been in this business as long as Marv and I, that most of the work is done before you ask. If you do a good job before the ask, the solicitation can be the easier part of it. And what we're telling you now, do not let your foot off the gas pedal, okay? You should continue those 4 phases, the discovery, the cultivation, the solicitation, and stewardship. And Marv and I are going to discuss how you can do that. We want to tell you that philanthropy has faced challenges as before. And we want to point out that philanthropy right now is actually responding better to the COVID crisis than did to the 08-09 recession. And probably the #1 predictor of philanthropy is the stock market, and it's doing amazingly well. And Marv and I will tell you, we love gifts from foundations and corporations, but when you look at the giving pie, 68% of gifts come from individuals, and then 9% are individuals who have passed on, and then family foundations make up half of that 18%. And you add those numbers together, you get a whopping 88%. We also like to point out that just 12% of the donors comprise 88% of the $450 billion that was given last year. We're seeing positive results on fundraising from home. We're going to talk about that. And now I want to get to our guest. He should get a parking space. He's been on this show so much. Marv LeRoy and I are good friends and colleagues. I don't know to consider him a better friend than colleague. I think that you're a better friend, and he's a darn good colleague. And what he's done is simply amazing. We both met when we had engagement in the community college arena. Marv now has raised, is it close to $500 million? Hey, Marv, tell me when you get to $1 billion. And in 2015, he started something called the Institute for Philanthropic Excellence. I'm going to ask him to take a moment to talk about it. And in just a couple of years, he has put together a network of more than 40 associates. And right now, they're supporting the success of 100 nonprofits. He has a mantra. It's called more money equals more mission. Can you just take 30 seconds? We're going to start a lot of questions. First, tell us about the vision of the Institute.
Well, it really was all about wanting to serve the smaller to middle-sized nonprofits, the groups that generally didn't even have a chance to think about council and looking at more significant, more comprehensive projects. Most all of the 100 or so organizations that we've helped and assisted over the last 5 or 6 years have been smaller institutions. You know, you talked about 1.5 million nonprofits in America. 90% of those institutions or organizations have budgets of far less than $500,000. So they're small. By the way, I just read an article recently by a group of economics or economics professors at a couple of colleges, and they are predicting that as many as 1/3 or 500,000 nonprofits will go bankrupt by the end of this year. So it's not surprising that we have a lot of people joining webinars like this and calling us to ask to see where we can be of assistance. So the good news is the Institute has been everything that we imagined it would be.
Yeah. And I
By the way, before I forget, Jim,
I wanted to thank, no, before you want to go further,
go ahead.
I just thank you for your leadership in providing, you have been getting smaller and mid-sized nonprofits into the arena of campaigns and major gift initiatives that before you was not possible because your expertise was not affordable. So thank you for the type of leadership that you are providing the sector, and I butt in, so you get the floor.
Well, no, that's fine, and I certainly appreciate that. And you know, we have a mutual love fest. It's our ability to make what we do affordable is very much the result of the fact that I know people like you, people who are committed to building legacies and doing good in communities as opposed to just getting rich off of being a consultant. And there's certainly a lot of those people in this world. You know, we have 40 people now, 40 independent contractors in 18 states and the District of Columbia. We not only have wonderful talent, we have proximity. We have an ability to keep costs down in all segments of the work we do, including travel, now that we're pretty much in everybody's backyard, which is kind of neat. I do want to also give a plug for Stratagems. You know, when I was looking at what we would do as an institute, and we publish a lot. You and I have done a lot of publishing, but so have some of the other coaches. And we really take education as an important component of what we do to heart. But when I looked at possibly creating our own newsletter, you know, when I started reading yours, I said, this is silly. You know, you're doing the best one in the business. Let's just put it out there and promote it as part of the Institute. And I thank you for giving us the right to do that. Anybody who looks on our website can go back over 5 years and look at all of your Stratagems in our archives. So it's worth giving him your email, folks.
Thank you, Marv.
Worth the read. And he does them every month. I don't know how he does it.
Marv, you ready for our? Yeah. Well, hey, are you ready for Q&A?
Let's do it.
Are you ready for the questions? Okay, let's get going. Hey, hardly a day goes by in which we don't see this word, pivot. The need for nonprofits to be flexible and responding to an incredibly complex and changing world. How do you recommend nonprofit leaders revise their strategy, tactics in an environment in which they don't know is more than they do know?
Yeah, boy, it's hard to imagine that we don't know everything about this virus and its impact on society at this point after so many months, but it still tends to be somewhat enigmatic. And, you know, well, let's hope we continue to learn more and more and find a way out of this mess that we find ourselves in. Yeah, I have to say, and Jim, I think we finished on this note the last time we talked about these topics. You know, one of the greatest attributes of nonprofits, and certainly the advancement professionals within nonprofits, is that we are very flexible people by nature. You know, we easily adapt, we are very innovative in the way we go about our business, and we're always quick on our feet, whether it's, you know, in the moment of a solicitation or, you know, when we're asked to create a new program, to create a resource development line, we seem to always answer the bell. And we make the best of every situation. So you know, we're in tough times right now. There's no doubt about that. This has gone on far longer than I think any of us would have hoped. But we're figuring it out, and a lot of us are really just, you know, trying to get to the next day. And I can tell you right now, with the campaigns that we have in play, and they're all over the map, over the 4 different phases of campaigns, we have continued to make extraordinary strides in getting to those goals. So kudos to all of our partners for hanging in there. We're proving that this stuff is still worth hanging in and doing.
Okay, and on that, tell you what, we talked about the 4 distinct phases of the gifting cycle. Let's break them down and let's think through. You know, we're a business that was built on the principle and gold standard of meaning and purpose. That's been removed from us. We have this virtual environment. So let's break down the 4 distinct phases. It starts with prospect identification, or what I call discovery. What are your suggestions on, does the discovery phase change in the virtual world?
I think if there's a hurdle to get over, or a conscientious decision to kind of, wait it out. I think early on in this process, when the virus was new to us, people were basically saying, "Oh, we'll just wait it out. It'll be gone in a couple of months. Let's hope for the best." People just kind of did more in the way of discovery and research, and took advantage of some quiet time, much like some of us in the advancement world do during the summer season, when people aren't around. It's hard to get a hold of them to do other things. You kind of go into your more internal phase. So I think that it really provided opportunities. But the problem is that this thing is stretched on for far too long to just stay in that phase of the cycle, and people have had to be either pushing themselves or be pushed into moving beyond discovery. You can only manage so many people in your your portfolios or your databases at a high level. So at some point, it's time to move to phase 2.
Yeah. By the way, I wanted to bring up, in my book, we have a concept called How to Identify Prospects. Most people think CIA, and they think a Central Intelligence Agency. In Eskin Fundraising Training, we talk about capacity, inclination, and access. And people, when you're talking about prospects, the easy one comes to mind. Well, here so-and-so has a lot of money. Well, okay. Why would they be interested in your particular nonprofit or cause? And that's the I, the inclination. And even if you can establish the capacity, inclination, how do you get to Warren Buffett or whoever, the prospect you identified? So think capacity, inclination, and access. And by the way, Marv, I think one of the great ways to engage board members is to get them to open the doors virtually. People are home. They're much more accessible than ever before.
Absolutely, and it's a great time to get them involved in just calling to say thank you, just calling to check in to make sure that those people who are great supporters are doing well and thinking about you while you're thinking about them.
Okay, let's move on to the important world of cultivation. We're now moved to a virtual world where most of our day is doing video conferencing. What's it take to carry off effective virtual cultivation moves?
Yeah, I actually have to, and this is something that you and I kind of promised ourselves that we would, take advantage of the 2 months that we've last talked about this topic to really kind of bring some new things into the discussion and talk about some new realities. One of the things that I really think is going to stick with us after the virus does finally find its way out of our lives as a primary interest is that cultivation will be done much more virtually than ever before. The ability to build relationships, to have conversations in a more personal way than just phone calls, or meeting at an event where there's hundreds of people around and you try to grab 5 minutes. I think this is going to become more of a component of that work that we do. And the whole idea of cultivation is to build our relationships. And we have found that, look, frankly, if you can solicit people this way, you can certainly have conversations where you're not having the discussion about a dollar amount. And I really think that this technology is going to help the work that we do to be more personal, especially for those national organizations who are constantly moving around the country, spending a lot of money getting to people. To be able to do it this way is far more reasonably priced and efficient.
And we want to point out, in the fundraising world, whether it's in person or if it's virtual, the more contact you have in person or virtual, probably that's going to be connected. You're going to raise more money. When you get somebody's time, they're giving you an indication. They're becoming a very live prospect. When you can't get their time, they're also giving you an indication. And we're saying too, really right now, we have an opportunity to cultivate more than ever because the toughest thing is people's time, and people just happen to be home a lot more. So we like to say, maybe you can't get them in your physical hug, but get them in your virtual hug. Hey, Marv, let's move on to solicitation. We've talked about this. You know, we grew up. This is almost counterintuitive. The solicitation had to be done eyeball to eyeball. But you were the first one to report to me of successes in virtual solicitations. Can we share a little about that?
Yeah, and let me just kind of do a transitional thing from cultivation to solicitation. I had was part of a Zoom call like this with an individual from an organization that we're working with and a couple, an older couple. I think they were both in their 80s. And you know, you just never know how it's going to go when you're on the phone with somebody or you're on in a platform like this. And you know, at some level, you're always wondering if it's a good time. Is it, you know, are you intruding on other things that they should be or would rather be doing? And it was funny. We're having a conversation, and the wife, you know, looked at us in the most genuine way. Said, "How wonderful it is that you took the time to come into our lives in this way. We've been sitting around here doing nothing, and that's not the people who we are. We like to make a difference in the world and have an impact on things. And isn't it wonderful that you gave us a chance to do that?" And you know, as fundraisers, we always have to remind ourselves of that part of the work that we do. We give people a chance. We invite them into our world to do special things, and that's a treat. That's something that we you know, it took me a lot of years in fundraising to finally come to that awareness. But I wasn't, you know, I wasn't intruding. I wasn't getting in the way of other things that they should be doing. I wasn't asking them to do something magnanimous as much as I was giving them a chance to do something they wanted to do anyway. So that's kind of my transitionary piece. As far as solicitations go, you know, certainly it's all about building relationships. It's about making it as personal as you can. And this type of a platform has done that for us. It's better than a phone call. It's you know, better than a text. It's better than all those other things because we can see each other. We can look into each other's eyes. I love your reference to virtual hugs. We can make it personal. We're not quite there yet. You know, there was an old joke in fundraising: the deal wasn't closed until you shook hands. Well, I'm not sure we're ever going to shake anybody's hands anymore in the world anyway. I think people are scared to death to touch each other.
Hey, give me an elbow. Give me an elbow.
Yeah, whether it's elbows or this may be enough. A little wave, you know, I'm good. We're good to go. But I really think that the other piece of this that we have to remember is, if we're going to do solicitation where we have to ask for a number for a certain thing within a certain time frame, you have to spell all that out. I think more than ever before, the written word that we share with people is also more important than it's ever been. In our world, when we do campaigns and we do solicitations, in addition to the case statement that articulates the broad vision of the campaign and the organization, we always have individual solicitation proposals, a written one-page document that summarizes what it is we're asking for. So there's no misunderstanding with the person that we're speaking with or persons that we're speaking with. So I think that is critically important in this moment, because we're not able to hand it to them physically. We've got to make sure we're doing that well virtually. And that way you also have you have kind of that leave behind document, you know, something that they can ruminate over. And also when you have the follow-up call, because most times you don't close a gift in the first conversation you have about the specific ask, you'll have something as a reference point to remind everybody where you left off. So I think that we didn't really touch on that,
You know,
much
I'm
last
reminded. Yeah. 5 years ago, if we had this conversation about making a major gift ask over video conferencing, we would say that's nuts. But it is actually working. I mean,
it is.
Times have changed, and actually I want to jump back. And I wanted to ask, you know, we're hearing a lot. Go ahead.
Well, and they're not small numbers. I mean, we're making asks via Zoom for $1 million. I was part of a solicitation that was $20 million in a $40 million campaign. You know, that's bold. And you're right. 6 months ago, that would have been heresy. Nobody would have let anybody do that, let alone suggest it. I don't know that it's going to become the norm. I'm not going to make too many, you know, 5 or 10 or $20 million asks once I don't have to do it this way. That's worth showing up and being present. But you know, your 5-figure gifts, I think this is going to continue as a viable option.
Hey, Marv, we're hearing a lot about donor-advised funds. They are already the most dynamic component of philanthropy. Fidelity Charitable alone awarded, I think, a 7.3 billion in grants last year.
Yeah.
This year,
Yeah.
the pace is way, way, way up. What advice do you have for bringing donor-advised funds into the conversation with donors and prospects?
Yeah, I think that's another very, very positive aspect of the world that we live in right now, and the changing environment that the virus has created. You know, when we were talking about DAFs, donor advised funds, 6 months, a year ago, a lot of us were kind of bemoaning the fact that, and that the term was used, there was a lot of money in the parking lot. You know, a lot of people put money in these funds as a way to skirt taxation. And then it was just there for some time in the future. And they hadn't really made decisions about where they were going to use it. And the other element of it was, well, they're kind of stockpiling it so they can make larger, significant gifts and get more bang for their buck, so to speak. I think that in this moment, with so many nonprofits being challenged financially, there are a lot of people out there who are stepping up and using those funds to make an impact with their favorite charities. There are, as a matter of fact, you and I spoke recently about a couple of families that have DAFs and family office networks who have used their money as matching challenge. I think you featured somebody in one of your last strategies who was doing that.
Yeah. Hey, Marv, this is a question that's coming a lot from our nonprofit partners. How can they consider making a regular, ongoing solicitation in connection to a special COVID relief fund?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, obviously, this particular topic is on everyone's mind. You don't have to give a lot of explanation other than maybe how it has particularly impacted your organization. We always talk about comprehensive asks anyway, especially with those individuals who you can ask for a larger sum of money from. I always like to, we don't make a large ask for a campaign without also factoring in the annual fund. We always have that mantra: protect the annual fund, carve out a piece to make sure that their annual, consistent, habitual giving continues. And if they're not people who have been doing that for some time, we try to cultivate that and create it in them going forward. So I think, putting in a COVID piece, if you want to refer to it in that way, is just another element of giving them a kind of a laundry list of things that they can fund. And I think it's so much on people's minds. It's gonna resonate for a lot of people.
Right.
Remember,
we're
however,
about the halfway point, and we say, hey,
I just want to say, remember the one other point that goes with that, and this one rings home when you talk about health and societal problems of the moment. I don't ever like to talk about need. And you've heard me say this before, you'll never see the word need in a case statement for a campaign. Nonprofits don't need much of anything. We aspire to do extraordinary things. We desire to add new programs. When we get to a point of need, we start losing people's attention, because in our world, if people get a sense that your nonprofit is teetering, they're not going to invest good money after bad. And that's an important point for those.
I think particularly at this time.
Exactly, for those 1/3 of the nonprofits who are right now in fiscal distress. Don't use the argument that we got to keep the heat and lights on or we're going to go out of business. Nobody's going to invest in that. You've got to still give a positive aspiration.
We're about at Marv, we're about the halfway point. I still have plenty of questions. But John, do we have any comments or questions from the audience? We wanted to refer to that earlier. They'll still have more time to type in. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we do have a question here. It's
if not,
if you don't have a contact, is connecting with the company's community outreach the best avenue, or the best way to cultivate a relationship?
Jim, you want me to jump in?
Marv, I'll let you go first, and then I'll take the easy part.
All right. Yeah. And it kind of struck me when
I don't think. Go ahead.
Well, you were talking earlier about how how the giving breaks down: individuals, corporations, foundations, government. every gift that you get, regardless of whether it comes from one of those specific types of donors, comes from a person. If you're getting a corporate gift,
Yeah.
you have a relationship with people or a specific person. If you're getting a foundation gift, you probably have a relationship with a program officer or someone else, a board member at the foundation, or a family member for the family foundation. All gifts are from people. And so it's a great question, because who is the person who you're going to be able to strike up that important relationship with and build upon it to get to a place where you can ask them for a gift of significance. So is the community person
I want
right?
to go, yeah. I want to go to the 6 degrees of separation that everybody on the planet, with the exception of Ken Bacon, is separated by no more than 6 personal relationships. And folks, I guess the cold call is better than no call at this time, but I would really work with each of your board members, your other donors, your volunteers, your management. And if there's a particular company, ask them, do you know anybody there? And according to the 6 degrees of separation, they will.
Exactly.
Be sure to harness relationship power.
Make sure
Hey,
you
Marv, this
exhaust.
is another question that's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Marv, how can nonprofits right now make the case for unrestricted or general operating expenses?
Yeah. That's always a tough one, because as we know statistically, and some of this is stilted because of the major billion-dollar campaigns at colleges and universities these days. Over 90% of all gifts in America today are restricted by the donor for an intended purpose. So the challenge for us to raise unrestricted funds is certainly a real one. And as we know, most of our operating costs fall into that category. So it's becoming more and more difficult to justify that. You have to keep making the case that you can't do all those wonderful programs and provide all those wonderful services without some administrative background stuff going on, and somebody has to pay for that to keep it going. So I think, and again, as I said earlier, with regard to campaign asks and being comprehensive, just build that into your asks. People get excited about programs and services. There's no doubt about that. But if they're excited about those things, they have to also be excited about the totality of your organization, and they will respond to that if you just put it into a comprehensive solicitation proposal.
Marv, you referred to earlier that I think was something like 1/3 of the nonprofits are at risk. I can tell you the executive directors and boards of those nonprofits, they need unrestricted general operating monies to keep moving forward. Let's tell another issue, I think, is those organizations that have endowments are very well positioned for the environment we're in. How can a nonprofit use this platform of COVID to solicit endowed funds?
Well, again, it's another destination for people's giving, and for those, I would venture a very educated guess that of the 2/3 of nonprofits who are hanging in there, or perhaps even doing pretty well during this time, they have reserve funds, they have endowment funds. They were able to, in very good times, build these funds up for the moments of challenge, and they're well positioned. And that's not by accident. There was a conscious decision at some point in their evolution to make sure those monies were in place. And I think everybody should aspire to that. Now, it's easier said than done for a lot of organizations who really struggle to raise money just to keep things moving and live day to day. But endowment funds. There are still a lot of people in the world, especially people in the finance world, who are not great fans of endowments because they don't like hoarding away money for the purpose of raising money. But I can tell you, having worked for a lot of colleges in my life, the strength of those institutions is largely their endowments. We rate our higher education institutions based on the size of their endowments. That's how important it has become. And I can tell you right now, and I know this firsthand because we have a couple of favored institutions, higher ed institutions in our household, where our sons just graduated about a year and a half ago from. Siena College and the University of Notre Dame returned 20 million and $7 million in room and board dollars to students who were returned home for that spring semester. Those institutions can't continue to do that for very long, but the ones who will be able to continue to do that for any length of time are the ones who have endowments of some size to draw upon.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Marv, let's move to that final phase, which closes the loop. That's stewardship. That's in which we express our thanks, we acknowledge the gift, and most importantly, we show the impact of the gifts. I think you can never thank a donor enough. What is your general advice on stewardship practices during COVID-19?
Well, I don't think there's anything special about COVID-19. I think stewardship is all too often an afterthought. It needs to be something that is factored into the equation at a much higher level. You and I both know that the first or the beginning of the next ask or the next solicitation starts with stewardship. You're saying thank you and recognizing gifts and showing genuine concern for the people who are your great supporters is a critical aspect of what we do. I think every organization in their advancement office should have a stewardship plan. There should be 3 or 4 or 5 very basic elements of a plan that you can do. Don't put things on your stewardship plan that are going to take extraordinary amounts of time and money that you don't have. Figure out what you can do and what you can do well. Engage your volunteers, especially your board, in a lot of these activities, and expand your reach by bringing more people into the fold. There's nothing more fun than saying thank you. Who can't say thank you?
Yeah.
And by the way, we need to think more about doing it well.
A best practice, we're hearing a lot of our directors of development. A lot of our donors, let's face it, they have the gray hair like Marv and I. They're on an age and maybe they're not as comfortable with the new technology. And not only can you improve the value of their relationship in your nonprofit by teaching them how to use the different video conferencing tools, they just need a little hand holding. That's they'll appreciate it because they'll be able to use that tool and keep in better touch with family members. Marv, your specialty at the Institute for Philanthropic Excellence is major gift and campaign initiatives, because by far that is the most productive and efficient form of fundraising. You like to talk about the 4 phases. Could you take a moment to talk about each of these phases and where it might fit into the COVID puzzle?
Yeah. I think most consulting firms focus most of their attention on campaigns because, as you rightly point out, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the real big money is, and gives you a chance to not only raise money as a goal, but also raise consciousness, raise your profile, and hopefully raise your capacity to do more later on in fundraising, even after the campaign comes to a close. So these are vital to, but I also like to think that we do a lot of good work in the areas of public monies with regard to legislative agendas and positioning relationships with people in the public sector. And we are being asked to do a little bit more of that now too, because there are obviously funds available that both for COVID-19 and moving beyond that, that people might want to start looking at. But there's no doubt about it, campaigns are where it's at. Our 4 phases in a campaign are pretty straightforward. There's an infrastructure build, a lead gifts phase where you go to the top dozen or so prospects and begin to build momentum and get early gifts of significance to prove that you are worthy in what you're promoting, and to use that as a leverage to inspire other people to follow that lead. And that takes you to the public phase where it becomes more broad in its scope. You talk to hundreds of people, not dozens of people at that point. And then hopefully it takes you to closure, and you have the word contemplation, which I like a lot. You begin to contemplate what comes next. You position, as we always say, once you do a campaign, there's no such thing as after campaign or post campaign. It's between campaigns, because people will fall in love with the results of your campaign and want to do the next one as soon as you can get to it. So you want to plan out what you're going to do between campaigns to bridge that divide. In this moment, and I can tell you right now, we have started 3 new projects, 3 new campaign projects in the last 2 months, and we'll start another 3 in the next month or a month and a half. Organizations are seeing the value in taking this time where we're a little internally focused, more than we usually are, to begin getting at that first phase. That infrastructure build takes 3, 4, maybe as much as 6 months, depending upon the complexity of the campaign. And you have to begin to build out your messaging, your case statements, build leadership, do the research on your campaign or your prospect list. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing before you even ask the first person for a gift. So this is a great time right now, assuming if you're somebody who is either a gambler or a prognosticator, when we're going to roll out of this thing and become more social and public again, to get at building your infrastructure and getting ready. And I have been able to convince a number of organizations and my partners in crime at the Institute, the associates, that this is a great time to get involved in a campaign, because by the time you're ready to be more out there, the world will be more welcoming.
Yeah. And so you're saying if you were a nonprofit, say last year, you were just mulling about, should we do a first campaign? You're saying that there's a great window to do your startup work.
I think so. I have a lot of people who agree with me right now. We have a lot of campaigns. We have a lot of discussions in the pipeline, and a lot of that is driven by the fiscal realities that people are finding themselves in. But I will tell you, I've had a number of phone calls just this week alone from organizations saying, "Can you help fix our budget problem?" Campaigns don't fix budget problems. No. Campaigns are more futuristic in their impact. Now, that's not to say that we can't help, level the finances a little bit, or using the term, from COVID-19, flatten the curve a little bit and help people out financially. But it doesn't happen that quickly. This is a process that requires a process, and you have to give yourself enough time to see the realities. Can we make important gifts happen between now and the end of the year to close a gap in your budget? Perhaps, if you jump in right away. But if you wait until the fall to do that, you're going to be at the end of 2021 before you start raising any money.
Yeah. John, by the way, are there any other questions or comments in the queue? We're doing pretty good on time. Marv,
not at this time, Jim.
You got a pretty good fastball. Marv, we make you responsible. And by the way, the big thing about campaigns, let's stop there. The big thing is about the major gifts, okay? And we're the precious few. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on how you can discover and build up the cultivation with the leadership and major gift donors that are so extraordinarily essential to campaign success?
Yeah, well, that is the essence of a campaign. I mean, determining where those relationships exist, going into campaign, where you can develop the next group of those people at that level on a pretty fast timeline, and frankly, for the folks who you can't move that quickly through a process. And in our campaign model, our sweet spot for campaign goals probably between 5 and 15 million, relatively small campaigns by today's standards. I mean, for a small nonprofit, those are extraordinary campaigns. We never get to everybody. We talk about having a couple hundred prospects to get 50 critical gifts. And we always say that about campaigns. Regardless of the goal, whether it's 100 million or a million, everyone rises and falls on 50 critical gifts. So to get those, you like to have 3 to 5 prospects, and that translates to a couple hundred prospects. You never get to all of those, but that doesn't mean they're going to fall off the map. What they're going to become are your prospects to be paid attention to in between your campaign. And I always say, even when you're not in campaign, you should be in campaign mode. Jim, you and I both know, after having raised money for, I think, collectively about 80 years, you don't.
That's scary. That's scary, by the way.
It is pretty scary. Think about how many times we've met with people over those years. But you don't raise money aimlessly. You raise money by having a plan, by having positive messaging, and you ask people. It is a very thoughtful process. And so if even if you're not in a formal campaign, have a case statement. It doesn't have to be a 20-page or 8-page booklet. It could be a front and back one-pager. It just articulates what it is you're trying to raise money for. You know, and you know, the other thing what you asked earlier about unrestricted gifts, you know,
Yeah.
so many people in today's day and age, especially people under 40, want to restrict their gifts. They give you $100, they tell you where it's going to go. You know, when you and I remember, 30 years ago when we started out in fundraising, nobody would ever tell you they wanted their money to go to anything particular unless it was at least $1,000. Now it's a whole different game.
Yeah.
So the challenge for us to get people to fund those unrestricted areas in our budget is to make them choose one of those things that we want them to send the money to, or to target the money for. So when we do annual fund solicitations, don't say, please send us whatever for the good of the cause, or for the most pressing thing that we need to spend. Give them 5 choices, 5 things that you need to spend money on, but make them think they're choosing where their money goes. And it's a great tool that works very effectively now in getting people to fund your unrestricted budget items. Just make them look more restricted.
Yeah. Hey, Marv, we make you responsible not only for knowing everything about fundraising, but also be an expert on human psychology. And of course, I got to tell you, everybody listening in on this webinar and everyone in the world is coping with incredible levels of stress. Do you have any personal advice? Because you're about as busy as anyone I know, how to deal with stress.
Yeah, I'm the last person in the world you want to ask that question to. First of all, I honestly, I never allow myself to feel any stress. I know that people laugh at me when I say that. Tomorrow's another day. Don't sweat the small stuff. Look, I'm an old baseball pitcher. I learned early on, it's about the next pitch, not the pitch you threw back. And if you're not going to survive in sports, you're not going to survive in life if all you do is dwell upon the things you did or didn't do well. Keep it focused on the future. And I go back to what I said to start. There's nobody better in that regard, or in that sense, than advancement officers and fundraisers. We have to always be positive, because there's enough negativity in the world, and we're about bringing people together, not dividing them.
Right. And I think, too, that is a great message for each of our nonprofit leaders. I mean, there are heroes all around us. There are donors that are stepping up to support you with their gifts of money and time. Get that word out. Get it out through social media or email blasts or a video. But I think we're all looking for uplifting good news. And I think every day, a nonprofit, there's 1.5 million, a professional and a volunteer are generating positive light.
Absolutely. And when we do our fundraising, and you always finish on this. I don't want to steal your thunder, because you're going to talk about the only bad ask is the one you don't make. But there's a close one to that. It's when you don't ask for enough. It's you really have to challenge yourself to not leave money on the table. The last thing you always hearing no isn't necessarily the worst answer you're going to hear. No means you really pushed the envelope and you went a little too far, perhaps, and you want to turn no into a yes, and there are ways to do that. If you want to learn how to do that, give me a call later. That's a whole other conversation. But the worst answer is yes immediately. You didn't challenge. If somebody says, I'd like you to make a gift of $1,000 to support our science program, and somebody says, sure, can I give you the check now? You left money all over the place. You didn't challenge that person at all.
That way, we had bosses that call those go-away gifts.
Yeah.
I think part of the mindset, by the way, John, is we're doing well here in time. Are there any other questions or comments in the queue?
Not at this time, sir.
Okay, well, we'll keep on moving. By the way, Marv, we're real excited. Like you, one of my mentors is the great Laura Fredericks, the attorney turned fundraising guru out of New York City. And she likes to emphasize, philanthropy is not a zero-sum game. And Marv scared the heck out of me and said that we have 80 years in this business between us. But we can honestly tell you that we have seen those donors up close. And they probably get more satisfaction out of the gift process than the benefactor. And you really have to believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, a lot of times when we're talking about these legacy gifts, these transformational gifts, they do tend to come from people who are a little bit older in their lives. You know,
Yeah.
they've been able to amass some money to be philanthropists. And, you know, you also have to be aware of time and
Yeah.
timing. You know, we talked about, you know, listen. One of the questions we talked about last time was, you know, when do you know it's the right time to ask? Well, you know, a lot of times the donors are telling you, so, you know, some of them will say, you know, we haven't talked about money in a long time. You know, or don't you have anything going on? And, you know, sometimes they'll even ask you that. Let me tell you a quick story about timing and how important it is to not miss the moment. We had a gentleman, I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but we had this individual who we knew was ready to make a significant gift to this arts organization. And gentleman was 80-something years old, near 90 years old, had not done a lot in philanthropy, but had begun to give more money to things and kind of put himself on the radar screen. It was a $2 million ask. And it was going to fund.
Hey, was it done in person or over a video screen?
No. This was a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. So it was face to face. So we got the meeting, and he actually was so old that he had a healthcare partner that came with him to meetings to help him through the process. Actually carried his checkbook around, and that'll come into this discussion in a second. So we teed it all up. I wrote up a proposal. They were going to make the ask, hand over the proposal, do the whole dance, and he was going to say yes to this because we had done all of our homework and we knew this was exactly what he would get excited about, and he had more than enough money to do it. So it's $2 million ask. This is two very, very people who had done some fundraising. They were pretty accomplished fundraisers. So they go to dinner and this is the first time they really had a discussion about money with him. He had come to some performances and they knew each other but not that well. But he's near 90. We got to make the ask. So and I wasn't invited along to be at the table, which was kind of disappointing because it would have gone differently had I been there. But they ultimately did not make an ask for a specific amount of money. They talked about projects, proposals.
That is the worst mistake you could make.
He turns to the person that his companion and said, "Get the checkbook out, write him a check for $25,000." Well, they were ecstatic. $25,000. Now this is walkaway money, like you were referring to. So the next day I call him up. How'd it go? Oh, it was great. He's so excited about us. He's ready to be there for us. I said, great. How'd the ask go? He said, well, we really just didn't feel comfortable asking for the $2 million. He wrote us a $25,000 check though. And I said, well, that's nice. He died the next week.
Folks, if you learn anything from Marv and I, an ask is asking for a specific amount for a specific purpose by a specific time.
Right.
And inspire and tell your donor what that money will accomplish.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marv.
It gets worse than that, Jim. This gentleman, who was a wonderful man, left them $100,000 in his estate plan.
Yeah.
Without being asked. He would have given him the $2 million. Now, I'm not going to say he probably would have written a check for it, but he would have made the commitment for $2 million.
I think next time they're going to take you.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to close out. By the way, John, are there any other questions and comments in the queue? We've got a little time left here.
We had a very shy group this week. No questions.
We do. Well, I tell you what, I'm glad. I don't have a very shy co-host here, Marv LeRoy, but I like to bring up one of my favorite poets was the late Maya Angelou. And she said that people will not remember what you said. They won't even remember what you did. They will never, never forget how you made them feel. And our job in philanthropy is to make the donor prospect feel like they are the most important person in the world to our organization. Marv says we give a money back guarantee, folks. Your chances of getting the gift go way up when you ask. The only bad ask, Marv, is
the one you don't make.
Right. And I close, I'm sorry, I've done this for 18 weeks, but I think President John F. Kennedy, when giving the commencement address at American University on June 10th, 1963, was speaking to us right now. This gives me goosebumps. He said that our most basic common link is that we all inhabit the same small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we're all mortal. I keep on seeing that and thinking President Kennedy was speaking to us right today in the year 2020. I want to, by the way, one last opportunity. Any questions, John, in the queue? If not, we're going to go to happy hour early. John, anything in the queue?
No, sir.
Well, listen, I want to thank you, John, for once again making it a very smooth show. And to Marv LeRoy, friend and colleague, thank you for the type of leadership, expertise, and sound advice and counsel you have made available to smaller and mid-sized nonprofits that was never available before. Thank you for your personal leadership in making philanthropy what it is. And to everyone, by the way, Marv, is LeRoy family, how are you all doing?
Everybody's great, and as you know, our Mets are having some fun with your Red Sox, so it's all good.
Oh, it's a good show. Listen to our nonprofit partners. Thank you. We're excited about next week. We're going to have Laura Fredericks, the expert on the Ask. And everyone, please, thank you for your commitment and service to nonprofits, and stay safe. And we'll see you next Wednesday. And good night.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Marv.